Alara moved quietly along the stone path that led to the center of the grand temple. The sun had barely risen, spilling pale light over the carved pillars that towered like silent sentinels, while the other girls of the kingdom prepared for the mating ceremony, donning silks embroidered with silver thread and jewels stolen from the royal treasury. Alara carried nothing but a basket of dry wood and flint. Her fingers, slim and steady, were already stained with soot from tending the ceremonial fires that burned each dawn in honor of the Alpha King. She had always been drawn to the flames. The fire was honest. It did not judge or demand. It merely responded. She could make it dance in small flickers or roar to life with a sweep of her hand. No one had taught her. She had simply learned as if the flames themselves whispered the secrets of their movement to her. And that was enough. That had always been enough. The courtyard was alive with preparation. Young women rehearsed their bows and their graceful walks, the delicate sway of their skirts over polished stone. The air was thick with incense and excitement, the scent of cedar mingling with the sweet fragrance of flowers that had been carried in from the royal gardens. Some girls laughed nervously. Others whispered about the king's favor, speculating who might be chosen this year. But Alara did not laugh. She did not whisper. She did not hope. She bent low, arranging the logs in a precise pattern. Each flame needed space, room to breathe, and she worked carefully, humming a quiet tune to herself, the smoke curling around her like a protective cloak. She did not hear the soft steps behind her at first, or the stir of energy in the air that told her someone was watching. When she finally looked up, she froze. Kale, the Alpha King himself, stood at the edge of the courtyard. His dark cloak hung like a shadow behind him, and even in the morning light, his presence was commanding. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the scene with an intensity that made the heart of any girl flutter. Yet Alara felt no flutter, only a tense awareness, as though the air itself had thickened. She had heard stories of him, of his ruthlessness, of the way his spirit, Wolf the ancient creature bound to the royal bloodline, whispered in his mind, guiding his actions, seeking truths that no mortal could see. The stories spoke of his power, his cruelty, his solitary nature. Yet here he was, standing silently, his gaze fixed entirely on her. "Tell me your name," he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of command and something else, something curious and almost cautious. Alara swallowed, her throat dry. She had never been called to speak to a king before, and certainly never in such a private, piercing way. Her hands twitched at her sides, as if the fire she tended could burn in response to her fear. But she said it anyway, steadying her voice as best she could. "Alara," she whispered. Kale's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he had known the answer before she spoke. He stepped closer, and with every step, the air seemed to thrum with tension. She could feel it in her bones, in the hairs on her arms, and in the faint silver veins that ran along her skin veins she had hidden all her life. Ever since they first appeared when she was a child, the curse she bore had always been her secret. She had learned to hide it beneath gloves and sleeves, to speak softly and keep her head down to avoid drawing attention. But now, with Kale standing so close, the veins along her forearms began to shimmer faintly, catching the sunlight like strands of silver thread. He did not flinch. He merely observed. "The fire," he said quietly, almost to himself. "It burns differently for you." Lara's heart skipped. No one had ever noticed the way she lit the flames, the careful rhythm she maintained. She wanted to turn away, to escape the weight of his gaze. But her feet were rooted to the stone beneath her. Kale extended a hand, as if inviting her to come closer. She hesitated, the heat of the flames dancing across her face. And then, almost without thinking, she stepped forward. As soon as her hand brushed against his, a surge of silver light pulsed from her veins. It was faint, but enough to make the flames leap higher, twisting and curling as though alive. The fire roared in response, spilling sparks into the air. The other girls paused in their preparations, watching with wide eyes as the ceremonial flames danced wildly. Alara's heart raced. She had never let her power flare like this in front of anyone. Never. She feared she might be seen as dangerous, cursed, unworthy. She glanced up at Cale, expecting anger or fear, but he only looked at her with something else. Something that made her breath catch. "Interesting," he said softly. "The prophecy. It begins with you." She did not understand the words fully, but the way he said them made her shiver. The prophecy. She had heard whispers of it, stories told in hushed tones to children, speaking of a girl born with fire in her veins, destined to change the fate of the kingdom. But she had never thought it could be her. She had never thought anyone would notice her at all. "You mean me?" she stammered. Cale's expression did not change. "Yes, you." Alara felt her curse flare again, responding to the fear and disbelief that coursed through her. The flames around her seemed to rise in response, licking the stone walls, crackling in the early morning air. She instinctively stepped back, but Cale did not move. He stood his ground, his dark eyes fixed on her, unwavering. The air between them seemed charged with an invisible force. Alara realized, with a mixture of awe and terror, that she was no longer just a firelighter tending the ceremonial flames. She was now part of something far larger, something that pulsed through the kingdom and the prophecy alike. Cale finally reached out, his hand hovering near her wrist, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked. Alara shook her head, unable to speak. The silver veins on her skin shimmered brighter, as if the fire inside her was trying to answer for her. Cale's eyes softened slightly, just enough to make her chest tighten. "You are mine," he said, almost as if declaring a truth rather than giving a command. The words echoed in her mind, a mix of fear and strange wonder. She had never belonged to anyone, had never wanted to belong, and yet something in the way he said it made her feel seen, truly seen. A sudden gust of wind swept through the courtyard, scattering embers from the flames into the morning air. The other girls gasped, stepping back, while Alara struggled to control the fire that had leaped to life in response to the energy between them. Her hands shook, her heart pounded, and for a moment, she feared she might lose control completely. Cale reached forward again, this time letting his fingers brush lightly against her wrist. The silver veins pulsed, but instead of flaring wildly, they seemed to settle, bending toward his touch. The fire calmed, the flames returning to their steady rhythm. Alara looked into his eyes and felt something she had never felt before, a connection, a recognition that went beyond words or fear. It was as if the prophecy itself had reached out and found her, binding her fate to this man she barely knew. The wind died down. The courtyard was silent, except for the crackling of the flames. The other girls whispered, unsure of what they had just witnessed. But Alara could only focus on Cale and the strange, undeniable pull that drew her toward him. "Stay," he said, his voice low but firm. "The ceremony, it waits. But you, Alara, do not." And with that, he turned, his cloak trailing like a shadow behind him, leaving her standing among the flames. Her hands were still trembling, her curse still glowing faintly, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life, as she had known it, was over. The prophecy had begun. Cliffhanger. As she lowered her hands, the ceremonial flames flared again, brighter than ever, sending sparks into the sky. And in the midst of the fire, a single thought burned in her mind. Whispered by the Alpha King's voice, "The prophecy begins with you." The halls of the Moon Court echoed with whispers as Alara was escorted through the towering doors of the royal palace. She had never imagined a place so vast and alive. The walls shimmered with enchantments, reflecting the soft glow of moonlight, even though the sun had yet to fully rise. Tapestries depicted battles, heroes, and kings long past, their eyes seeming to follow her as she walked. The palace felt alive, and yet oppressive. Cale walked beside her, silent and commanding. His cloak brushed the marble floors, and his gaze scanned every corridor as though he could sense danger before it even appeared. For Alara, every step seemed surreal. She had gone from tending fires in the quiet outer temple to standing at the center of the kingdom, her silver-marked hands still trembling from the flare of her curse. "Why me?" she asked softly, almost afraid that the words might break the fragile calm around them. Kale's eyes did not waver. "Because you are the one who can control it," he said, voice low but unwavering. "The prophecy speaks of fire and ruin, but also of balance. You are the balance." Alara swallowed, confused. She had always believed her curse was a burden, a mark of danger that could destroy everything she touched. She had never imagined that it could be a gift door, that the king of the realm, feared and untouchable, would see it as such. The palace doors opened into the moon court itself. A wide hall where the walls sparkled with crystal and the ceiling seemed to dissolve into a painted sky of moonlight and stars. Advisors and nobles had gathered, whispering in low tones, their eyes following Alara as she stepped forward. Some looked with fear, others with envy. A few, rare and silent, observed with cautious curiosity the high oracle. An elderly woman, draped in silver and blue, stepped forward. Her gaze was sharp, almost piercing through the layers of magic and secrecy surrounding Alara. "The girl," she said slowly. "She is different. The prophecy, it is alive, and she is its spark." Alara felt the weight of every eye in the room. She tried to shrink within herself, to make her silver veins disappear beneath her sleeves, but they still glimmered faintly in the light. The whispers grew louder, a low hum of tension that filled the hall. Kale raised his hand and the room fell silent. "She will stay," he said, voice echoing with authority. "No harm will come to her while she remains under my protection. I have seen her fire. I have felt it. She belongs to the moon court as much as I do." A murmur of protest rose among the nobles. "Your Majesty," one of them said, "she is untested. Her bloodline is unknown. You risk everything by allowing her presence here." Kale's eyes darkened. "I choose my own risk," he said. The words carried a weight that silenced the room. Even the High Oracle nodded, though concern lingered in her eyes. Alara could barely breathe. She had expected rejection, punishment, perhaps even exile, yet here she was, standing at the side of the Alpha King, caught in a current far beyond her understanding that night. Kale insisted that she accompanied him to the Moonstone Forest, a sacred place where the magic of the kingdom was strongest. The forest was said to test those touched by the prophecy, revealing the true strength of their spirit. Alara felt a mix of fear and anticipation as they rode through the winding paths. The night thick with shadows and whispers of unseen creatures, the trees themselves seemed alive, bending slightly as if to watch them pass. Fireflies drifted like tiny lanterns, their glow reflected in the silver markings on Alara's skin. The air smelled of pine and earth, of rain yet to fall. Kale guided her to a clearing bathed in moonlight, the center dominated by a circle of ancient stones. "This is where you will understand your power," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Do not fear it. Do not run from it. Only by accepting it can you control it." Alara knelt at the edge of the circle, feeling the pulse of magic beneath the ground. It resonated with her own fire, calling to her, urging her forward. She hesitated, fear clutching her heart. What if she failed? What if the power inside her could not be controlled? Before she could respond, a shadow stirred among the trees. A creature, dark as smoke and with eyes that glowed like coals, leaped from the undergrowth. Its claws were sharp, its movements swift, and it growled with a sound that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth. Kale stepped forward, drawing a dagger imbued with moonlight. His wolf spirit emerged silently around him, a protective aura that shimmered against the darkness. "Stand behind me," he commanded, voice firm yet calm. Alara felt her heart pounding, her curse reacting to the fear and adrenaline. She raised her hands instinctively, silver light erupting from her veins. The fire swirled around her, forming a barrier that shimmered against the creature's shadow. Sparks flew, lighting the clearing in a ghostly glow. Kale's eyes met hers. "Do not hold back," he urged. "Let it flow. Trust yourself." For the first time, Alara let her fire move freely. It surged outward in controlled waves, striking the shadow beast with precision. The creature yelped, recoiling, and then vanished in a cloud of darkness and smoke. The clearing fell silent, save for the crackling of her flames. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted. Her hands trembled, the silver light fading to a faint shimmer. Cale knelt beside her, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You are stronger than you know," he said quietly. "I almost lost control," she admitted, voice shaking. "I didn't mean to hurt anything." Cale shook his head. "You did not hurt. You protected, and you learned. That is what matters." For a moment they sat together in silence, the moonlight bathing them in soft silver glow. Elara could feel her fear easing, replaced by a strange warmth. Cale's presence was steady, grounding, as if he could anchor her very soul. And for the first time, she wondered if maybe she could belong not just here, but with him in a way that felt forbidden and impossible. But the peace was fleeting. In the shadows, the High Oracle watched, her eyes narrowed. "If she dies," she whispered to herself, "the kingdom dies with her." Lara did not hear the words, but she felt the weight of them in the air, a tension that made her chest tighten. She realized she was no longer a simple firelighter tending flames. She was central to a destiny she had never asked for, and that knowledge filled her with both dread and awe. As they returned to the palace, Cale did not speak much. He seemed lost in thought, his jaw tight, his wolf spirit stirring restlessly around him. Elara walked beside him, hands clenched at her sides, trying to steady the fire within her. She wanted answers, wanted to understand why she had been chosen, why her curse had marked her for something so immense. But Cale offered none, only his silent presence, a shield against the whispers of the court and the weight of the prophecy. That night, Elara lay awake in a guest chamber within the palace. Staring at the ceiling, as the moonlight painted her silver veins on the walls, she could hear the distant sounds of the city, the soft breathing of guards, the occasional rustle of wings from creatures that nested in the palace rafters. And she could feel Cale's presence even from afar, as if his watchful spirit reached across the stone walls to keep her safe. Her thoughts drifted to the ceremony she had avoided, the girls who had practiced their bows and steps, and the life she had thought she would lead, simple, quiet, unremarkable. None of it mattered now. She was bound to something larger, something powerful, something terrifying. And yet, she felt a spark of something else, a thrill of possibility that made her pulse quicken. The fire in her veins pulsed faintly, responding to the emotions she had never allowed herself to feel. Fear, hope, wonder, desire, all tangled together, stirring the silver light that marked her as cursed, yet chosen. Somewhere deep inside, she understood the truth. She could not run from this. She could not hide forever. Her life, her curse, her very being had been called forth by the prophecy and by the Alpha King, who had seen her as more than a girl tending fires. And as she drifted into a restless sleep, a single thought burned in her mind. She had stepped into a destiny. She could not escape, and the kingdom's fate rested on her shoulders. Cliffhanger, outside her window. The moonlight shifted, and Elara glimpsed a shadow in the courtyard, a figure cloaked in black, moving with intent. It was watching her, and she knew in that instant that the danger surrounding her was only beginning. The moon court had never been so tense. Elara walked through the grand halls, feeling the weight of every gaze upon her. Courtiers and nobles whispered as she passed, their voices hushed yet filled with judgment. Some looked upon her with awe, recognizing the prophecy that marked her as the fire wielder. Others regarded her with suspicion, afraid of her curse and the power it might bring. Even those who had once smiled at her now avoided her eyes, unsure how to behave around someone chosen by the Alpha King himself. Cale remained near her side, silent and watchful, his dark cloak sweeping the polished floors like a shadow. His wolf spirit, ever vigilant, flickered in the edges of her vizuna, reminder that he was always there, guarding her even when she could not see it. Elara, Cale said softly as they entered the council chamber, "You must understand, some will try to turn the court against you. Some will see you as a threat. Do not be swayed by their fear or envy. You are here because you were chosen, not because you were desired." Elara nodded, trying to steady the racing of her heart. She had not expected life in the palace to be easy, but the reality of constant scrutiny and whispered threats was heavier than she had imagined. Every step felt like walking on a blade, every word she spoke measured for its impact. And always, in the back of her mind, lingered the fear of her curse. If it flared too brightly, she could ruin everything, destroy the trust she was only beginning to earn, harm those around her, or even harm Cale himself. The council convened in the Great Hall, a room carved from white stone with high ceilings and intricate murals depicting the lineage of kings and queens. Advisors from every province sat along the long benches, their faces a mixture of curiosity, caution, and skepticism. "The girl is untested," one noblewoman hissed, her eyes sharp as daggers. "We know nothing of her bloodline. How can we trust her with the kingdom's fate?" Cale's eyes darkened, his voice calm but unyielding. "You will trust her because she is here, and because the prophecy chose her. I will not allow fear to dictate our future." Another noble, older and more cautious, leaned forward. "Your Majesty, with all respect, her curse is dangerous. If she cannot control it, the consequences could be catastrophic. The records speak of fire that could destroy even a king's fortress." Elara felt the tension in the room tighten around her chest. She had known her curse carried danger, but to hear it spoken aloud by the advisors of the kingdom made it real in a way that terrified her. She wanted to shrink back, to make herself invisible, yet Cale's presence beside her was a steady anchor. "You overestimate her weakness," Cale replied. "The girl has fire in her veins. She has already faced danger and emerged stronger. She will control what others fear." The council murmured among themselves, but Cale's authority was absolute. For now, the matter was settled. Elara breathed a small sigh of relief, though the knot of anxiety in her stomach remained. That night, in the quiet of her chamber, Elara tried to calm the fire within her. She traced the silver veins along her arms, wondering if she would ever truly control them. Each pulse of magic felt alive, eager to escape, and she feared the moment it might do so beyond her will. She thought of Cale, of his unwavering gaze in the Moonstone Forest, and of the words he had spoken. "Do not hold back. Trust yourself." She wished she could, but fear clung to her like a second skin. The next day, an unexpected visitor arrived. A young noblewoman named Serena, whose beauty was renowned throughout the kingdom, approached Elara with a forced smile. "I thought to welcome you," she said, her tone sugary but sharp, "though I hear you have a talent for fire that even the king finds." "Remarkable." Lara nodded politely, keeping her expression neutral. She did not trust Serena. The girl's eyes held calculation, not warmth. Serena leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Be careful, child. The court does not forgive weakness, and some of us do not forgive those who are chosen instead of us." Elara's pulse quickened. She had expected jealousy, but not so openly, so threateningly. Yet she forced herself to meet Serena's gaze calmly. "I will be careful," she replied. Later that evening, Cale requested her presence in the royal gardens. The moon hung full and bright over the manicured hedges, reflecting off the polished stones of the fountain. The gardens were serene, but the stillness felt charged, as though the air itself held its breath. "You are not safe here," Cale said as he led her along the stone path. "The court will test you. They will try to turn you into a pawn. You must be ready." Elara's voice wavered. "I do not know if I can do this. I am not like them. I am not noble. I am just a firelighter." Cale stopped, turning to face her. His eyes, dark and fierce, softened for a moment, revealing the weight he carried. "You are more than a firelighter," he said quietly. "You are part of a prophecy that even I do not fully understand, but I will stand with you, always." Her heart tightened at the promise, and for the first time, she allowed herself a flicker of hope. Perhaps she could endure this, not alone, but with him. But their peace was shattered when a shadow stirred among the trees. A figure moved silently, almost blending into the moonlight. Elara's curse reacted immediately, silver veins flaring along her arms as fear coursed through her. She took a step back, instinctively summoning a small burst of fire to illuminate the intruder. The figure froze, revealing a nobleman from the court, one of Cale's advisors, who had opposed her presence. His eyes gleamed with malice, and in his hand he held a small dagger, Kale to disrupt magic. Kale stepped forward, placing himself between Alara and the man. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. The advisor sneered. "I have come to test her," he said, voice cold. "If her power cannot be controlled, the kingdom will be safer without her." Alara felt panic rise, but Kale's hand on her shoulder grounded her. "Focus," he whispered. "Control it. Do not fear it." She drew a deep breath, letting the silver fire rise within her without letting it lash out blindly. The light formed a shield around her, radiating outward in a shimmering circle that pushed the advisor back. He stumbled, his dagger flickering uselessly against the magical barrier. "You see," Kale said, his voice low and dangerous. "She is not weak. She is necessary." The advisor retreated, bowing slightly, though his eyes still burned with resentment. "This is not over," he muttered before disappearing into the shadows. Alara sank to her knees, trembling. She had faced danger in the Moonstone Forest, but this political attack, this deliberate attempt to challenge her was different. It was personal. It was a warning. Kale knelt beside her, brushing a hand against her hair. "You are stronger than you think," he said gently, "and you are not alone. Remember that." Alara looked up at him, the silver light of her veins fading to a soft shimmer. The warmth of his presence filled her with a strange, comforting courage. Perhaps she could survive this court, perhaps she could even thrive. But one thing was clear, her life had changed forever as they returned to the palace. Leia glanced at the windows of her chamber. Shadows moved behind the glasses, watching, waiting. The court was divided, some fearful, some envious, and some plotting, and she knew with a chill in her bones that the challenges ahead would not only test her fire, but her very heart. Cliffhanger. That night, as Alara lay awake, she heard the softest whisper carried on the wind. "The fire will awaken fully, and the kingdom will tremble." She turned toward the window, silver veins pulsing faintly in response, and realized that her curse was no longer something to hide, but something that might decide the fate of the entire realm. The kingdom had never been so tense. Rumors of Alara's power had spread through the Moon Court like wildfire. Some feared her, some envied her, but all whispered about the prophecy that marked her as the fire wielder chosen by the Alpha King. Even those loyal to Kale looked on her with uncertain eyes. Alara could feel the weight of expectation pressing on her. She had learned to control the fire in her veins, but the challenge ahead was greater than anything she had faced. Oracle had warned her that the prophecy was not merely about power, it was about choice. Her actions, her courage, her willingness to embrace her fire would decide not only her fate, but the fate of the entire kingdom. Kale stood beside her as they stepped into the central hall, his wolf spirit shimmering faintly around him. The full moon outside bathed the palace in silver light, reflecting the aura of power surrounding them. "Tonight," he said, his voice low but firm, "we face the true test. The spirit that waits beneath the kingdom will not yield easily, but together we are stronger than anything it can send." Alara nodded, swallowing her fear. She could feel her silver veins pulse in response to his words, as if the fire within her recognized his confidence and drew strength from it. They descended into the hidden catacombs beneath the palace, the air thick with ancient magic. The walls were etched with runes that glowed faintly, responding to the proximity of Alara's curse. Each step echoed through the tunnels, a reminder that they were stepping into a place older than the kingdom itself, where old power slept and waited for the one destined to awaken it. At the heart of the catacombs, the ground trembled. A massive figure emerged, a spirit bound long ago to the bloodline of those marked by fire. Its form was ethereal, yet solid, a swirling mass of darkness and silver, with eyes that glowed like molten metal. It moved with an otherworldly grace, its voice echoing through the tunnels like a song of thunder. "You have come," it intoned. "The fire returns to its source. You, child of flame, will either embrace your destiny or bring ruin to all." Alara's heart pounded, but she did not step back. She could feel Kale's presence beside her, his strength and courage bolstering her own. She had trained, she had faced danger, and she had learned to control her curse. Now, she would face the spirit not as a frightened girl, but as the fire wielder she was meant to be. The spirit lashed out, tendrils of dark energy reaching toward her. Alara raised her hands, summoning silver fire that coiled around her like a shield. The magic flared, illuminating the catacombs in a brilliant glow, and the spirit recoiled, hissing in anger and surprise. Kale stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Remember," he said, "we are one in this. Trust your fire. Trust yourself. Trust me." Lara drew a deep breath and focused, letting the fire flow through her without fear. The silver light twisted and danced, wrapping around the spirit's dark tendrils, neutralizing them, pushing them back. The spirit roared, a sound that shook the very walls, and surged forward again, stronger, more threatening. This time Alara did not defend. She advanced, letting the fire burst outward, not as a shield but as a weapon of will. Her hands moved in fluid motions, controlling the flames with precision. The silver fire intertwined with the dark energy, not to destroy, but to purify. Slowly, steadily, she forced the spirit back, her heart aligned with the rhythm of her magic. Kale's wolf spirit emerged fully, circling around them, lending strength and protection. Together, human and wolf, fire and courage, they pushed the spirit into a retreat, into the earth itself, where it had long been bound. When the last tendril of darkness vanished, Alara collapsed to her knees, trembling but victorious. Her fire dimmed to a soft glow, and the silver veins along her arms faded to gentle lines. Kale knelt beside her, brushing her hair from her face and holding her close. "You did it," he whispered, voice filled with awe. "You controlled it. You embraced it. You're more than the prophecy ever dreamed." Alara's chest heaved with exhaustion and relief. She looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion she could no longer deny. I could not have done it without you," she said softly. Kale's hand found hers, and he squeezed gently. "You could have done it alone," he said. "But I wanted to stand by you because I chose you. Not because of the prophecy, not because of the fire, but because of you." Tears pricked at Alara's eyes, and for the first time in her life, she felt a sense of belonging. The fire within her was no longer a curse to hide, no longer a mark of fear. It was a part of her, a gift that could protect, heal, and illuminate the darkness. And for the first time, she understood the prophecy not as a burden, but as a path to hope. The spirit, now subdued, left a mark on the catacombs, a silver sigil that glowed faintly in recognition of her power. The High Oracle, who had watched from a distance, nodded solemnly. "The prophecy is fulfilled," she said, her voice echoing in the silence. "But this is only the beginning. A greater power now stirs in the world. You must remain vigilant." Alara and Kale emerged from the catacombs into the first light of dawn. The palace was quiet, the courtiers still wary, but there was a shift in the air. News of their victory would spread, and with it, understanding and acceptance would follow. The kingdom had witnessed the power of the fire wielder and the bond between her and the Alpha King. Kale turned to Alara, his eyes soft but full of strength. "The kingdom is safe for now," he said, "but you and we must be ready for whatever comes next. Together." Alara nodded, her silver veins pulsing faintly in the morning light, a gentle reminder of the fire that now belonged to her. She had faced fear, darkness, and doubt, and had emerged stronger, not alone, but with Kale by her side. The court began to gather, their faces a mixture of awe, respect, and curiosity. Those who had doubted her now approached with cautious admiration. Some bowed deeply, acknowledging her courage and her role in the prophecy. Even those who had opposed her could not ignore the undeniable truth. Ilara's fire had saved the kingdom. Kale had proven unbreakable. Later, in the gardens where moonlight still lingered in pools along the stone paths, Lara and Kale walked together, hand in hand. She felt the warmth of his presence, steady and protective, and knew that the challenges ahead would be faced not as a girl alone, but as a fire wielder and a partner to the Alpha King. "Ilara," Kale said softly, stopping to look at her, "do you understand now? The prophecy was never meant to frighten you. It was meant to guide you, to show that even in fire there is hope. Even in danger, there is choice. She nodded, tears of relief and joy glistening in her eyes. I understand now, she whispered, and I choose to face it.
With you?
Kale smiled, a rare and tender expression that lit his usually stern face. Then we face it together, as it was always meant to be. The sun rose higher, casting golden light across the gardens. The silver veins along Alara's arms shimmered faintly in the warmth. No longer a mark of fear, but of strength, of control, and of destiny fulfilled. The kingdom had survived, the prophecy had been honored, and a new chapter had begun, one of hope, courage, and the enduring bond of fire and wolf, human and king. Final cliffhanger/ending hook. As they walked, the High Oracle approached, her face grave. The prophecy has awakened greater forces, she said quietly. If the fire has grown so strong, then something else has been stirred. Be ready, for the dawn is only the beginning. Alara and Kale exchanged a glance, hands tightening together. The kingdom had survived the night, but the world beyond the moon court whispered of challenges yet unseen. And for the first time, they were ready to meet them not as king and subject or prophecy and pawn, but as two souls bound by choice, courage in the fire that could illuminate even the darkest future. The first rays of sunlight touched their faces, and the silver veins along Alara's arms glowed softly, a promise of power, protection, and love yet to come.